So let's have a look now at using dimensions in a drawing. Now we're staying in the 09 dimensioning.dwg file. You may have saved that locally on your machine to follow along with the videos. And what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm staying in the zoomed view I was in the previous video, where we can see that top left corner. You can see there's two dimensions there, 3532 and 1830. Select this dimension here and select this dimension here, and I'd like you to delete them. So just hit the delete key or use the erase command, and we're going to dimension those two dimensions again. So just pan and zoom so you've got them nice and central on the screen. Now I'm going to zoom in on the doors first, and I'm zooming in purely for clarity because I'm not working at a very high resolution for the videos. Obviously I have to do that, it's just the way it is with the way that we use the recording software. But obviously what we're going to do there is zoom in on these doors, and I'm going to dimension them and line it up with this dimension here. Now I'm in the Annotate tab on the ribbon, and before we do anything else we go to the Home tab on the ribbon, we go to the Layers panel and just check that we've got the right layer. We want to be on our AnnoDims layer. Then we go back to the Annotate tab, we make sure we're using the right dimension style. So that's in the Dimensions panel here, or in the Home tab on the ribbon, you go to Annotation here, and you can see that we're using Standard. So if I change that, I want to use that diagonal 2.5mm aerial. It's that one there. Now you do get this sort of weird little preview. If you go down to Manage Dimension Styles, that takes you into the dialog box, and you can set up your diagonal 2.5mm aerial there, and set it as current if you wish, and close it. Or you go here and use the visual setting like so. It's up to you which one you use. Now in the Annotate tab you've got exactly the same thing. You've got it here on the flyout, and it comes up there as well. So you can see you've got different tools, and you can see that you can go in and out in the same way, it's just in different places on the ribbon. So let's have a look at placing a linear dimension. So in the Dimensions panel here, I'm going to go to this little flyout here, and there's a linear dimension there. So let's look at linear dimensioning first. And what I have to do is make sure that my object snaps are on. You always dimension with object snaps so that you are accurate. Now it's asking for an extension line origin. Now if you look at that dimension there that's already there on the right hand side of the doors where the arrowhead is, an extension line is the vertical line that comes off the object. The dimension line then lays horizontally between the extension lines with the arrowheads touching them, and you can see how that works. So my first extension line origin is going to be here on the end point there. So make sure you get that endpoint snap. You might get an intersection where the dimension is intersecting the door. Click. And I'm coming over here to my second extension line origin. Click there. And as I come up, can you see I'm now placing that dimension? Now if I've got object snaps on, all I do is line in with that snap there. Can you see the endpoint snap? And click. If I pan down and zoom out, you can see that I've placed that dimension nice and neatly. And that's how they work. That's how these dimensions work in AutoCAD. And the lovely thing is they are completely associative. They're all one object. So when you're editing a dimension rather than just lines, arrowheads and text. That makes life a lot easier when you go into something like the Properties palette. Now let's place another dimension. Let's just zoom out slightly, and we want to go to this grid line here. Now ideally I need to go to the intersection of this grid line and this grid line so I get the exact point where the grid lines intersect, but I then need to line it in with this dimension I've just placed here. So again, I come to here, I go to the linear on the pull down. Now the trick is zoom in on the doors first, get your first extension line origin there, click, then zoom out, pan across, zoom in again. And this is where your object snaps are extremely useful. You'll get an intersection there, click. There's your dimension. Now be careful because there's two axes here. Zoom out slightly, and as you move around, can you see I can go this way, which is the height of that door, or I can go upwards, and that's the distance from the door to the grid line. So be careful which one you click on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in now once I've got that 3532 back, and I'll line it in, get the endpoint snap there, and click again. So as you can see, I've now placed those two dimensions back in the drawing. Now those are just linear dimensions. There's lots of other tools and lots of other different dimensions you can utilize. So for example, if I was going to do a radius of the door swing, I would select radius on the pull down, highlight the arc or the circle, Now it will highlight all of that because it's a block. Doesn't matter. As you can see, when I click on it, it finds the arc there. Now that's quite a big dimension, like so, but I can come around this way. I can dimension it. If I just zoom in there a bit, you can see that it adds an extra arc dimension line. Can you see that? Which is quite useful. Now it's up to you where you place it, obviously. I mean, I might just line it in like that, coming down vertically like that. Ideally, you want dimensions to be outside though. So I might possibly place it there and click like that, and there's my radial dimension like so. So that's how you use your dimensions in AutoCAD. You must use object snaps to be accurate. You must use the right dimension style as well, so that everything looks the way it should. And you also must use the right layer. Always put all of your dimensions on a separate layer. Let me show you why just before we close out on this video. If I go back to the Home tab now on the ribbon and go into the Layers panel, and I come in here and I'm just going to change my layer to a different layer. So I'm going to change it to layer 0. So that's my current drafting layer now. If I go back to that Anno Dims layer here and I freeze it, watch what happens to the dimensions behind. They all disappear. And it basically gives me a lot more clarity on the drawing. If I bring them back, click on there and thaw them out again, they all come back again. So always make sure that your dimensions are on a separate layer every time, because that way, for clarity on the drawing when you're working on the geometry, you can actually freeze those dimensions off and then place them back on later. So if I zoom out slightly, you can see that we've placed the 915 radial dimension and we've replaced the 1830 and the 3532 dimension there. As we work through this section, we'll look at editing dimensions and changing the appearance of dimensions on the drawing as well.